right, welcome back. You guys know I love to seek out and find products in the audio world that are above and beyond, that are special, whether they cost a little bit of money, a mid-tier amount of money, or a crazy amount of money. I like to focus on things that are beautiful, sound phenomenal, are built to a high level, and I have something for you today that has absolutely blown my mind. And yes, this is without question, there's not even any doubt in my mind, the finest, the best tube integrated amplifier I have ever experienced. I'm talking about the Cayin 170i. This is the Soul 170i, I should say. And they named it the Soul. I don't know why they named it the Soul, but I swear to you, it feels like there's a soul inside this chassis, inside this amplifier. So the Cayin Soul 170i is an all-tube, all-analog integrated amplifier from the brand Cayin. Anytime I see one of their amps on the internet or wherever in a photograph, they always look stunning and beautiful. And I always had the thought in my head, I wonder if they're really that nice in person. So first of all, I want to thank Larry over at hiendpalace.com. He sent me an email and said, hey, I love this amp. This is one of the best tube amps I've ever heard. I would love for you to hear it and review it. And it was like after a phone call, maybe a week later, I had the Cayin Soul 170i here on my porch, ready to unbox and place in the system. It's all analog, all tube. It uses 4 KT170 tubes. It uses 2 6SN7s. It also uses a 22 DE4 tube, one of those that I never heard of before. So all in all, the Cayin Soul has 9 tubes on top that plug right into the top. Now there's also a beautiful tube cage, probably the coolest one I've ever seen. It's not an afterthought. They actually put a lot of thought into this and made it artistic. The tube cage sits on top. You can pull it right off and run it naked if you like. I've been running it both ways. The pros of the cage is if you have any animals or kids that may touch those tubes, this protects anyone from getting burnt because those tubes do run hot. So when this came in, I pulled it into here. It was almost 100 pounds in the shipping box. I think it was 98 pounds. I unboxed it. By the time I got the amp out, I think the amp comes in at around 88, 89 pounds total. I was able to lift it up onto my cabinet by myself. A little heavy, but I was able to do it. And I got it all installed. I put the tubes in, comes with a pair of gloves so you don't get your finger oils on the tubes. That's not good. And once I plugged it all in and hooked up first I hooked up the Icon 12 speakers, my reference speakers, and I turned it on and I was waiting to hear some kind of buzz or hum from the transformer. It was dead surgically silent. I was hearing nothing. Now, the Soul 170i has a warm-up process. When you turn it on, it takes about 15-20 seconds. It slowly warms up the tubes as to not shock them, so you're not going to blow out those tubes. They did it right here. So once that warm-up happens, you'll hear a little click from the amp and it'll turn on. Now look at the front of the amp. There is a huge volume dial, and the volume notch, so you know where you're at, lights up, which is awesome. So many integrated amplifiers fail to implement something on the volume dial that shows you where it is from across the room. I like seeing where my volume is set because there's a setting that I prefer most of the time. So with that light there, you can kind of see exactly where you're at. On the left side, there's a power button. The power button does have a gentle light glow about it. And on the right, you have your button for inputs. You have 3 RCA unbalanced ins and 1 XLR balanced in. So there's also a button for how you want to run this amp. There's 2 modes here, 2, not 4, 2 modes. And one is Triode, which runs at 75 watts per channel. And one is ultralinear, which runs at 135 watts per channel. You can change this on the fly with the button on the amp or on the remote control. There's no delay. When you hit it, it's instant and you can instantly hear the sound difference. Now, in the past, I've had many amps, I'm talking about 20, 30 years ago. I had tube amps that had a switch for ultralinear and triode. And back then on those amps, when I would switch it to ultralinear, I would get more hardness. It would get a little harsh. I liked the soft, beautiful glow of triode back then. But here on the Soul 170i, The Triode Mode gives you that beautiful tube sound, some glow. You hear more of the reverb trails. There's warmth. There's just an exposing of details that is beautiful. In ultralinear mode, you get a little uptick in the bass slam. There's more dynamics, a little bit more detail up top. And I don't want to say detail because both modes bring you the detail. A little more shine up top in the treble. And the mid-range is not as warm in ultralinear. So if you're listening to, say, heavy rock or metal or EDM or anything with a backbone of bass, you're going to want ultralinear. If you're listening to some smooth jazz, some jazz vocals, some easy listening, acoustic guitar, throw it in Triode and magic will just surround you. I love both modes on this, but I've been listening lately, the last week, more in Triode. So this amp on the back also has a preamp in. You could run this as a power amp if you have a preamp you love. And it also has 2 subwoofer outputs if you want to run one or a pair of subwoofers. Everything was thought of with this amp. Now, when I took it out, was listening to it, installed the tubes, checked everything out, I was really looking at this amp closely. And I'm telling you, this looks like, and I'm not hyping this, I'm not exaggerating this. This looks and feels and sounds like at least a $15,000 amplifier. It is world-class in build, in design, in parts quality, in execution, and yes, in sound quality. I'll touch on all of this within this review. So in the past, my favorite, I should say for the past 15 years, maybe, I don't even know how long it's been now, my favorite tube integrated amp ever since it came out was the Line Magnetic 219IA. Now that amp was a single-ended triode amp. It was lower wattage. It was a beautiful thing to behold, a bit industrial. It used 845 tubes for the power, 300B tubes for the driver tubes, had a rectifier tube, and it offered a big, beautiful, luscious sound that sounded good with almost any kind of music as long as you had the right speakers hooked up to it. I love that amp. I still love that amp. And last year I almost rebought it again. But the Cayin Soul 170i is the first tube integrated amp to surpass that Line Magnetic 219IA for me. Not only is it a little bit nicer in looks, build, design, I feel for me, it sounds better to me in every way. The Cayin 170i is a higher resolution tube amp, but yet it's never bright, lean, or thin, or hard. It's a smooth sailing kind of amplifier, but yet it brings out those details in the treble in not an overdone way and not an underdone way, but a just right way. Here you do get those floating details that come out at you. As I said before, you hear the reverb trails from the studio in the recording. Nothing hides, but yet nothing glares out at you or shouts at you with this amplifier. So this is not a Class A amp. This is actually a Class AB amp. So it has more of that drive, punch, and power versus a Class A. We all know there's Class A, Class AB, Class D. There's a couple others. But these are the main types of amplifiers that people buy today. Class A uses the most energy, puts out the most amount of heat, and has a sparkly top end, a nice beefy bass in the mid-range, really good bass down below, but it's all about clarity and warmth together, I feel, with Class A. Class D is about high power, right? Dynamics, kick, drive, energy. Yet the latest crop of Class D amps, like the Devile Astra I have here, they're smooth, they're beautiful in the mid-range as well. Class D has come a long way. Class AB is about punch, dynamics, kind of a balance of Class A and Class D, really. If you want to blend those together, it sounds absolutely beautiful as an all-tube integrated amp in the Soul 170i. All right, so let's get into using this with the various speakers I have here. When I first put it in, I hooked it up to the Icon 12s, which are indeed my favorite speakers to date that I've ever heard. They're big, they're beautiful, they have warmth, they have body, they have everything I search for. They sound good with all music. They're never dull or boring, yet they're never overhyped or excitable. They're just right. So they're also easy to drive. I think they're 92 to 93 dB efficient. They're 8 ohm speakers, so even 10 watts can power these speakers. So running the Soul, I was listening to some Andrew Bird. I've grown accustomed to her face. That is a song that is just beautiful, a beautiful recording. The voice is so clear and down the middle, and the instruments are kind of in a 3D holographic space. When I played it through the Soul 170i and the Icon 12s, hands down best I've heard this song sound. The vocals were a little bit bigger than usual, so they were kind of life-sized, right? Coming out in that 3D space. And the mellow instrumentation was in the background, and it created kind of a soundstage of depth. So you have the voice, the instruments, and some other background noise back there. The soundstage is very wide, and it's pretty tall, though it's not the tallest I've heard. But when you play music, and this was in Triode Mode, such as this with Andrew Bird, for example, it's just such an amazingly beautiful sound. Now, I swapped out the speakers and I put in the Pure Audio Project Duet 15s. This is what's in right now behind me. These are like 97 dB efficient. This is the horn model. I love these speakers as well. These are two speakers, the Icons and the Duets, that just have reached and grabbed my heart and won't let go of it. With the Duet 15s, there was less of the warmth in the mids, less lower bass, but there was still plenty of that to be had. The Duet 15s with the horn one were a little cleaner, a little crisper in the treble, and I was hearing the details with a little more life and excitement up top. Maybe not as much depth as the Icons, but with the Duet 15s, this might be the finest I've ever heard the Duet 15 sound. And I've run these with some pretty nice amps over the course of owning them. The Nagra HD setup I had, right? There were a couple more. The TNA 3100 HV integrated amp. The best I've heard these sound is with the Cayin Soul 170i, which tells me these two speakers that are easier to drive and are both horn designs love tubes. As we all know, horn speakers usually love tubes, and this was no exception. So what about if I put in the Bucard E50s, right? I placed these into the system with the Cayin Soul 170i. These are not an easy drive. They're something like 85 dB efficient, something like that, maybe 6 ohms if I remember correctly. I could be wrong. And lo and behold, whether I was in Triode Mode or ultralinear, holy wow, again, best I've heard the Bucard E50. So maybe not, it's up there with the best that I've heard the Bucard E50 sound. And right at that point, I was like, wow, this amp is not just a one-trick pony. This thing is making beautiful music with every speaker I have here. And it's sounding absolutely gorgeous. The sound in Triode, again, is a little bit softer than ultralinear. It's a little more romantic. It's pure tube goodness, right? Ultralinear, you're still getting all of that tube sound, but you're getting more apparent treble excitement, as I said, maybe a quicker, faster bass, a little more dynamic, and a sense of more raw power. What about low volume late night listening? The Line Magnetic 219IA was my previous champion at this. I would listen maybe using a half a watt at night, and the sound was big, full, luscious. I can say the same thing about the Cayin Soul 170i. It is a low volume champion. And of all the amps I had in here this year, this is the best amp I've had in here for low volume listening. Now, speaking of this year, I've had some pretty fancy stuff in this year. The Nagra HD setup. I kicked off the year with the Nagra HD setup, the Nagra HD preamp, the Nagra HD DAC X. I had a classic amp. That was an insane amount of money. To be honest, it really stressed me out to have it here because I don't come from that kind of money. I can't comfortably buy something like that. There's just no way. The Devilet Astra was another one that just shook me and blew my mind at how good it is. It's still here as well. That's all about power, injecting that drive into the speakers, energy. It's got that Class D powerhouse of an amp inside, beautiful preamp built in. But here I am with an amp that costs way, way less. Now the price of the Cayin Soul retail is $69.99. And that comes with the tubes, everything, the cage, the remote control, packaging that keeps it safe. And with my speakers, I actually am preferring the sound of the Soul 170i over that Nagra that I had in here in the beginning of the year. It's absolutely insane. Now, what about associated gear? I'm running this because this is just an integrated amp. It's all analog. There's nothing digital inside, so there's no streamer, there's no DAC, there's nothing of the sort in there. You can't hook up your Ethernet to it. It's just an analog integrated amp. So I'm running it with the Eversolo T8 streamer, streaming transport, which I love. It's been problem-free. It's been fast and speedy. It sounds awesome going into the DAC I'm using, which is the Fez Equinox DAC, which is a tube DAC, and it's made by the head guy over at Lampizator. It's one of the better DACs I've ever heard. It's definitely in the top 5 DACs I've ever heard, regardless of price. So then that's going right into the Cayin Soul 170i. It's rare that I get an amp in here that I can turn on and have it be 1000% noise-free and silent, and have it sound so beautiful with any music I want to play. I was listening to Rammstein, right? Amazing drive, balls, energy, right? Killer. I was listening to Diana Krall, right? Her Live in Paris album. Energy, excitement, everything I remember about that album. You feel like you're there in the audience at times watching her play. And when she does those piano solos, you feel the weight and depth of the piano. This Cayin Soul 170i is, without question, I said at the beginning, the best tube integrated amp I've ever heard in life. I've probably heard only about 30 or 40 tube integrateds in my lifetime, but none of them that I've heard, regardless of brand, regardless of origin or price, stand up to the Soul 170i. Now, yes, the Cayin Soul 170i is made in China, but it's not like your typical Chinese-made amps. This is not a fly-by-night company. Cayin is regarded as one of the high-end brands within this hobby. They've been around a long time. And much like Line Magnetic, they make amps that can compete with any other amplifier in the world, regardless of origin. I will tell you that without question. This looks and feels like a big money, exotic, high-end tube amp. That's how good it is. And the price of $69.99, yeah, it's a lot of money. It's $7,000. But holy cow, guys, this amp, you're not going to find, I'll put it this way, you're not going to find anything better than this for the money, and maybe up to $15,000. I don't even know if you'd find something better after that price. So all in all, the Cayin Soul 170i integrated amp is a powerhouse, beautiful, all analog, all tube amp that just delivers on every front. The remote is also beautiful. It's all metal. It's a chunk of solid metal. As far as the other things about this amp, biasing, you will have to check the bias every few months or so, maybe every month if you're like me, and it's really easy to do so. You don't need a meter. You just flick a switch, and there's a meter built into the amp on top that glows with an amber light, and you just turn the bias dial until the needle goes to the middle. Takes about 30 seconds to do, and I checked the bias when I powered it up. It was spot on from the factory, and it hasn't swayed from that since, so I never had to change the bias. For the two 6 and S7 tube slots, I did put in the PS Vane, the Pavane 6SN7 Summit tubes, which are their flagship tubes, and that did bring out a little more transparency in that mid area where the vocals lie. Those are beautiful tubes. If you are looking for high quality 6SN7s, the Pavane Summit series has bested the new old stock that I have here. So yeah, those are beautiful tubes. Again, I just want to thank Larry at hiendpalace.com for sending this out to me. I don't think he's going to get this one back. You can check out his website. I'll put a link in the description below if you want to contact him and mention you saw my review. And I don't know, maybe he'll help you out. I don't know, but just tell him you saw this review and you're interested in the Soul 170i. He's a great guy, easy to work with. What else can I say? I think that's about it. The Cayin Soul 170i, best tube integrated amp I've ever heard, And the last time I said that was over a decade ago with the Line Magnetic 219 IA. This has now surpassed that for me in just about every way. It also doesn't get nearly as hot as that Line Magnetic, but yet it sounds just as beautiful, if not more so, because you're getting more of the information coming out at you. So I'll leave it at that. I also have a written review at my website with many more details there. I'll put a link in the description to that as well. And I thank you guys for watching. I will see you very soon in the next one. Bye.